Toon Pictures invites you to tune in again for the most highly acclaimed movie of the year.
He's here.
Tune in again for Roger Rabbit, Jessica Rabbit, Baby Herman, Benny the Cat, and the most incredible cast of Toons ever to perform together in one motion picture.
What's up, Doc?
My biscuits are burning.
This is hot spot.
Tune in again for Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
The last time I worked with someone with a speech impediment.
A Steven Spielberg presentation, a Robert Zemeckis film, rated PG. Now playing at a theater near you. Check newspaper for showtimes.
Smile, darn ya, smile, everyone, because this is Cinemarcade, the podcast about movies, video games, and the sparks that fly when those two worlds collide, much as if the real world were to collide with the Toon world. You see, it all comes together. My name is Steve Guntley, and today we are talking about Who Framed Roger Rabbit, a damn near perfect movie with a title that bafflingly does not have a question mark, and that has always driven me insane. Who are the little Toon sidekicks that I have joining me today?
I am who? I am the one who framed Roger Rabbit, which is why it's not a question mark.
Oh, I see. It's a declarative statement. Who
yes.
framed Roger
Yep.
Rabbit? And you
Yep.
also played on first.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. And who else is here?
Well, I might be a weasel because I have a tendency to laugh really loud. But it's me, J-Ban.
Well, welcome, everybody. We actually have a special guest joining us this week, our very first remote guest. We've got a very complicated, a very janky kind of setup going on here, but hopefully you won't be hearing that on your end. But we are joined today by one of the hosts of the 30-20-10 podcast. You'll also hear him on Talking Terrific Television and 80s in Depth. A really great podcaster, a good guy. J.R. Ralls is here. Hi, J.R.
Thanks. I'm super happy to be here, and soon, where Toontown once stood will be a string of gas stations, inexpensive motels, restaurants that serve rapidly prepared food, tire stations, automobile dealerships, and wonderful, wonderful billboards reaching as far as the eye can see. My God, it'll be beautiful.
Oh, this is a wild fantasy land you're talking about, JR. This could never happen in our America.
No
one's going to go for that when they can rent the red trolley for a nickel.
It's really interesting. I watched the show with my flatmate who is a LA native.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of a little pain points. You're like, ouch, ouchie, ouch.
We have the best public transportation system in the world. Yeah, I don't think that's
Did you
true
know
anymore.
Austin used to have a bus system called the Dillo, and it was free, and it was the same thing. You basically just hopped on and went to wherever it was going and got off, and then they nixed that one because it didn't make enough money.
Well, yeah, it's a free bus. I mean, I get that.
Yeah.
But they should have found it. They should have funded that a little bit, yeah.
I think it was either City of Austin or it was UT that put that on.
Okay.
And they decided not to do it anymore.
Well, it's gone in the wind. And speaking of gone in the wind, a little programming note, first of all, for those of you who tuned in expecting our Willow episode, I am excited to announce we now have our very first legendary Lost episode.
It was so good.
We had a technical issue in the middle of recording that we did not notice. So the recording basically had 2 minutes of uncorrupted footage on there, and it was just kind of nothing that we could salvage.
And then we lost an entire voice for the rest of it.
We did. So we're going to have to revisit our adventure with the Nelwyns and their NES spin-off later. But
Well, if you ever do revisit that, I'm up for coming back because Willow is just like Roger Rabbit, one of those games that I played a ton because I love the movie so much and I was desperate for more of that world, and the only thing I could get was an NES adaptation of a licensed movie. And listeners, if you're coming this far, you know what that means.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
very much.
And not to spoil that episode well in advance, but that game was better than this game. That game is
By a
little bit
lot.
more of a game than this game, which we will talk about, of course. But obviously, we're going to want to talk about this movie first, because Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which came out June 30th, 1988, directed by Robert Zemeckis and written by Jeffrey Price and Peter Seaman, and starring Bob Hoskins, Christopher Lloyd, Joanna Cassidy, Stubby K, and the voices of Charlie Fleischer and Kathleen Turner. That movie is goddamn perfect. I will go out on that limb. I will say this is a perfect film, or at least a movie that seems to be surgically calibrated to go perfectly into Steve's brain.
I'm going to say it's close. It's 99% there. The only thing I would change about this film, because everything else is perfect, there is a huge, giant cut scene where Eddie Valiant goes to Toontown, gets a cartoon pig's head stuck on his head, and they had to cut it out because it does kind of ruin the reveal of Toontown. It was a good decision to cut it out. But in doing so, they make the transition from him going, from leaving the diner to going back to his apartment, meeting Jessica. It's a little clunky.
Okay. All right.
That's my sole criticism. Everything else in this film, picture perfect, no notes, don't change a frame. Oh my God. Okay, it is a false cliche that you could not make Blazing Saddles today. That's not true. You could absolutely make it. You cannot make this film today. I'm going to say that. Here's why. You do not have someone with the clout of Steven Spielberg who can get two giant multinationals and a couple smaller ones to throw their IPs together. You do not have someone like Robert Zemeckis who is willing to go practical to get digital. Okay?
Yes.
Because if you look at the making of this film, it's fascinating. Oh my gosh.
Almost as good as just watching the movie, as watching the behind the scenes features of how this movie was pulled together, because there are so many places where they could have cheated and made things easier on themselves. It's like, okay, maybe this pelican doesn't need to be riding a real bike. He could be riding a cartoon bike across the scene. Maybe the weasel could be holding a cartoon gun. And they look for opportunities to like kind of twist those and make them harder on themselves.
Did y'all grow up on Looney Tunes?
Yes.
A little bit.
A little bit.
I grew
Okay,
up, I didn't have Krusty the Clown. I had Ramblin' Rod. And he was a guy who came out early before school wearing a brightly colored jacket, and he'd play cartoons before we all started school. Some public domain, some licensed for $1.50 from Warner Brothers.
Yeah. All right, so you grew up on Looney Tunes.
Well, I was definitely like a weird crossover between like Looney Tunes and like IP stylized characters like Darkwing Duck.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And Rescue Rangers and that type of thing. And like, but definitely my father loved Looney Tunes. So like we always watched a ton of Looney Tunes. And it was just like, it was just such a, Chuck Jones, that type of like inspiration of the beautiful practical art that was so spectacular. And then things that are genuinely funny, like the opening of this movie has a 4-minute animated sequence that is genuinely entertaining.
All right, that is an astounding opening cartoon, like, because that's using the full force of kind of 80s animation, 80s hand-drawn animation, at the very cusp before it went digital. Like, I think the same year, 1988 is when Oliver and Company came out, and that's the first Disney hand-drawn movie that incorporates CGI elements. It's very clunky, it's very jagged, but you could see it appearing. And then like Rescuers Down Under and Aladdin and things like that, they'll all use a lot of CGI. So this is kind of the most cutting-edge hand-drawn animation from before CGI really broke big and kind of integrated into everything. They're using the full force of everything they have for this opening 4-minute segment. It's absolutely wild. It's going all over the place, and it's so perfectly timed.
What year did this come out again?
88.
88.
Yeah. It's my favorite short of all time. If you just accept this as a cartoon short in and of itself, I think it's better than Hair Raising Rabbit, better than any Disney short I can name. I think this.
I might still give it to Duck Amuck, but other than that, this is pretty close. This is pretty
Duck
close.
Amuck's up there, but
Yeah.
if you look at the
Duck
quality
Duck
of this
Dodgers.
animation,
Duck Dodgers has my heart. I love Duck Dodgers.
rules. Oh, okay. We're gonna Justin, after this recording, I'm gonna make you watch Duck Amuck.
This is where I show my lack of age. And I'm like, what?
He's one of them. They're youngins.
I grew up
Rabbit
on,
season.
Duck season.
Rabbit season.
Oh man.
I mean, I always marvel at how much sheer effort and how much like joy there seems to be in the making of this movie. It feels like everybody is thrilling to the fact that they're getting away with this and that they're making it work. And you mentioned Chippendale's Rescue Rangers earlier, and that's the one thing I will counter with. The one thing that kind of has come closest to pulling off the Roger Rabbit vibe, I think, is the Chippendale movie. More than Wreck-It Ralph.
Objection.
Okay, all right.
Look, this film, Roger Rabbit, which was made 34 years before the Chippendale reboot movie, has such better special effects.
Yeah.
And it's not even close.
It's
I mean,
true.
if the human protagonist, when she's looking in Chippendale's eyes, she's staring at their forehead. Okay?
Yeah.
When Bob Hopkins is looking at Roger Rabbit, he's looking at Roger Rabbit. There is not like a mismatched eye line in the entire film. He went the extra mile. We are so used to actors acting against green screen today that we don't realize how amazing his performance was. But he actually started hallucinating.
I think I argue with you. I think we do recognize how amazing it is because it is better. Like his performance against these cartoon creatures, these toons, is better than anything you saw in Game of Thrones.
It's better than most of what you see in like the MCU.
Yeah, it is. Like,
and that's the thing is we have the MCU. We have this new era of actors acting in green screens with things that aren't there. And to what you had said, you still get it messed up sometimes. You're like, they're not looking at each other's eyes.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, this
So-
doesn't match up.
Why this was made 86 to 88?
Yeah.
Why, 35 plus years ago, were they able to do it better than we're able to do it today with
that's
so
the
much more
thing.
technology, so much more practice?
It has to come down to, in some cases, effort and care because
and I think the actor put the extra mile in because again, like they could have gotten the casting on this is legendary about how they went through a list of 20 people before they got to, is it Bob Hoskins or Hoskins?
Hoskins with an S.
Hoskin.
Yes.
I'm gonna get that wrong.
Hoskins.
Please
I'm just
feel
going to
free
call him
email
Bob because I always
Bob.
mess up his name.
Yeah,
too.
Bobby H.
Bobby H.
And then
Bobby
Zemeckis
H.
is Bobby
But
Z.
Bobby H brings so much, I think Spielberg said that he actually felt like he fit in a film noir, which I thought is really funny because first of all, that's not true. I've watched many film noir, and those film noir protagonists are hot as fuck.
It's true. It's
like,
true.
oh my god, like anyone who tries to say Bogey wasn't attractive is out of their fucking mind. Yeah, and Robert Mitchum, like no. But anyway, I get the sentiment is that he has a very emotive face.
Yeah.
And it works for both comedy and serious acting, and he plays so seriously in this role, at the same, like, without having a nod and a wink, which I think a lot of actors would have put that nod and a wink.
Yes. I mean, so the original people that they wanted to go with, their number one pick, do you guys know who the number one pick was?
Harrison
Bruce
Ford.
Willis.
Harrison Ford was the number one pick for the role of
It's off
Eddie
by like a
Valiant.
decade.
And
I'd like to see that. I would.
I'd like to see it, but also he would be so wrong for it. He does not have the right energy, and I don't think a 1988 Harrison Ford would commit to the bit the same way that Bob Hoskins does. But they also approached, Paul Rubens was going to play Roger, R.I.P., and they went with a different actor for that. But they also talked to Chevy Chase, Bill Murray, Robin Williams, Eddie Murphy, Robert Redford, Jack Nicholson, Sylvester Stallone, Ed Harris, and randomly, Wallace Shawn.
I really want to see a Stallone version.
I want to see the Wallace Shawn version, honestly.
Like,
I'd like to
Tones.
see. I'd love to see some of the alternate Dooms. Do you know who was in the running to play Judge Doom?
I know the lead the lead person was Tim Curry,
Yeah.
He said he
But-
was too scary.
which has
Yeah.
happened to him multiple times in his career for like a kind of gentle looking man. Like he gets like he always gets rejected for things because they think he's going to scare children. How do you think that would
like
feedback
scare
would
children
feel?
and provide a sexual awakening. That is what Tim Curry is good for.
It's the two things.
I mean, Judge Doom at the very end was pretty damn freaky. When he
Yeah.
goes with the red eyes and the daggers out, that scared the crap out of 1988 JR.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think he's even scarier. He's scarier throughout. He's so menacing. And Christopher Lloyd just brings his A game playing this villain.
Will anyone ever not be traumatized by that poor little
Fuck.
shoe going?
Oh,
into
the
shoe.
shoe!
He just straight up executes this random innocent shoe.
And the LAPD says nothing.
You know
Yeah,
what really
they just
bothers
watch.
me? The thing that really guts me about that scene every time, I've watched this movie maybe 20, 30 times in my life. I love this movie so much. But the thing that always guts me about that moment is that the shoe is kind of nuzzling up against his shoe like a friendly little
Yeah.
cat. And then he just dunks it. And it's like, horrible.
Literally nothing wrong with what that shoe had done. There was no reason other than, is it technically racism?
I guess.
Well,
yeah.
I don't know.
I mean,
Speciesist?
Judge Doom is a toon. You can be racist against your
That's
own
true.
race.
That is
But
true. I
he's
forgot about
not exterminating toons because he hates toons. He's exterminating toons because he's evil. He is just wanting to get more power and wealth for himself, and the toons are in his way.
Now, if you met somebody with the last name of Doom in real life, would you appoint them to a judgeship?
No.
I feel like if and the guy who puts off that energy and has a skull on his cane, like
yeah.
I would
So,
not put him in charge of
To
anything.
approach Judge Doom, we have to first approach this movie as what it is, a film noir with an actually good mystery
Yes.
in it. Judge Doom, even though his name is Judge Doom, we don't know his motivations, and his motivations are as old as the hills, and it's fucking capitalism and racism, and it's like this capitalist like ideology that fuels like Chinatown and a bunch of other film noirs and neo-noirs, and it's just like there's they did this in real life. They shut down the red car in real life. Like
That's kind of the crazy thing that sort of like gives this a little bit of extra weight at the end is like, yes, they thwart him in his plan, but like look around, like he won in the end. Like it wasn't him, but he won.
So for quite a while, I have always said the general plot of Roger Rabbit was true. They actually did those things, and everybody looks at me and they're like, "You're dumb. Cartoons aren't real." And I'm like, "No, no, no,
Not anymore.
No,
they're not.
Do you not remember that the actual plot of the movie was that he was trying to destroy public transit to make money off of it?
Right.
That is what happened in real
exactly what
life.
happens.
The oil companies and their friends did a whole bunch of dumb stuff, and now we don't have public transit.
Yeah.
When Austin's an interesting case because it happened somewhat recently, but we had a thing come up where it's like, all right, let's vote for trains. And a couple of different organizations came out of nowhere. They're not from Texas, not from around Texas, and they started blasting anti-train and public transit propaganda so hard.
So hard.
It is probably close to $1 billion a year is put into anti-public transit propaganda across the United States.
Wow.
It's absurd how hard they try these things. There was radio ads, print ads, signs up all over town, billboards. It was so infuriating because I was just like, we have one train for a city of about 1 million.
Yeah.
Could we get 2 more, please?
Just something else.
Anything.
Well, I want to step back a little bit and talk about the production of this movie because I went a little above and beyond this week in that I read the novel.
Okay. There's
I don't even know
two
how to read
versions
it.
of the novel.
Yes.
There's the novel that came out before Roger Rabbit, the movie, and then
Yes.
there's the creator of Roger Rabbit. When I kind of like the movie better than my own original novel.
Exactly.
I'm gonna reboot it to be more like the movie. So, which
Yeah.
version did you read?
I read the original. From 1981. It's called Who Censored Roger Rabbit? And let me tell you, that is a wildly different take. It is an absolutely strange. Have you read this, Jer?
So back in the 1980s, when this movie came out, I sought out the novelization, the original novel of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and somehow in nerd culture, even back then pre-internet, I was told it's nothing like the movie. You're not going to like it. And I read like 15 pages, and then I gave up. And you're talking to a guy who probably put like 100 hours into the NES game we're going to talk about. So I could not. I had to beat Judge Doom. We'll get to that later. But I was in love with the Roger Rabbit world. But even with that love, it couldn't overcome the original novel.
Yeah. The novel is deeply strange. All right, it came out in 1981. It's written by a guy named Gary Wolfe. And it is an absolutely bizarre take because in that strip, it still has kind of a film noir vibe, but it is set in modern day. Like they make references to things like Kermit the Frog that wouldn't have been around back then. And the tunes are not animated cartoons. They are comic book strip characters. And so basically it's this whole industry where comic strips are actually, they're not drawn, they're photographed. And these tunes communicate with actual speech bubbles that materialize above their heads whenever they talk, which is a very visual thing to include in a non-visual medium. Like, it's a very visual. Like, Roger is murdered early in the book.
Oh.
But because tunes in this world can create doppelgangers of themselves that can last independently up to 24 hours or something, because they dissolve after that. And that's how they get away with doing all their most dangerous stunts. Like, Jessica is like deeply unlikable, and she's like, a lot of the plot has to do with her like getting blackmailed for this porno that she did. Like, it's a really weird book. Like, I'm almost to the end of it, but it's a deeply strange and very different if you grew up on the movie.
It's interesting because I read that they are originally thinking about making Jessica Rabbit the villain, as they were also contemplating making a couple of other characters the villain, and I'm just like
Baby Herman,
and I'm just like, I'm really happy they settled on Judge Doom because I feel like he's proper villainous, but also she's like, oh my god, something at film noir is always all of those bad women, and I love that line where she's just like, I'm not bad, I'm just drawn bad.
And that was in the book,
yeah.
Same with Baby Herman's line about having a 30-year-old lust and a 3-year-old dinky. That makes it into both versions, luckily. Deeply strange novel. I'm interested to see where it goes because the Jessica that they've created in this novel is really unlikable, and like she just like is constantly shit talking Roger and like making him feel really terrible. So I don't know if this is going in the same direction as the movie, but I'll probably wrap this up tonight.
I mean, in the movie, doesn't she basically ruin her relationship?
Yeah, basically.
For money?
She gets coerced into doing it. But
coerced into doing it. She did it because Maroon,
right.
Black, basically said that Roger wouldn't work anymore unless she got blackmail.
That's right.
I thought it was a really interesting take to have patty cake be the sex surrogate. I was like, it was like it was just like, I thought that was a stroke of genius actually, because it was just like something so innocent, and but yet it's like so tawdry. And then the pictures, and they're like flipping through the pictures, and then Roger's losing his shit.
Like, what is Marvin Acme getting out of that interaction? That's a very specific.
Look, some people are not good people.
There are fetishes all over the world. If the internet has taught us anything, I guarantee you, if you Google erotic patty cake, you will find something.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. So going back to the novel, this came out in 1981. It wasn't a big hit, but it did catch the attention of some executives at Disney, and they bought the rights to the book, and they were really aiming to make this kind of their next big thing. Now, Robert Zemeckis was trying to direct it all the way back in 1982, but at that point, he just had 2 flops under his belt. He had I Want to Hold Your Hand and Used Cars, which both didn't really connect. So like, all right, we're going to sit on this for a while. And when they were first developing it, this was just going to be purely animated. Like, the entire thing was going to be an animated film. And it was when Steven Spielberg came on in 1985 that they decided to kind of hybrid it up a little bit. It was also important that in 1985 is when Michael Eisner took over as CEO of Disney. And he was kind of brought in specifically to turn around Disney's fortunes. We haven't really talked about the company in the 80s, but this was definitely the lowest ebb of all of Disney. Like, all of their movies were flopping. Like, they had a rebellion on the set of Fox and the Hound, where they lost a lot of their best animators, including Don Bluth and Tim Burton. They both left that movie and they went off to form their own careers.
And to make the best Charlie and the Chocolate Factory movie
absolutely, the only good one, frankly. But Don Bluth went off, formed his own studio with Universal, and they made the movie American Tail, which ate Disney's lunch in the middle of the 80s. Like, basically everything that he was churning out was kind of crushing him. They did Land Before Time and a bunch of movies like that where he was just absolutely dominating. And so Disney really needed to revamp its fortunes, and Michael Eisner really believed that Who Framed Roger Rabbit was going to be the movie to do it. So they dumped $50 million into this project, which was a ridiculous amount of money for back then. I mean, some estimates say that they went over budget to the point of maybe close to $70 million. And that was pretty unheard of at this time. But they had Spielberg on board as producer. They had Zemeckis back as a director, and now he was a successful director. He had back-to-back hits with Romancing the Stone and the first Back to the Future.
I love Romancing of the Stone.
Okay.
Like, my God, I love that movie.
It's
I don't
a
know.
fun
I haven't
movie.
watched it in a while. Hopefully it holds up. But, like,
I think it holds up. Yeah, I think it's solid enough. Yeah, it's been a little bit.
Kathleen Turner.
Yes. I love
so
Kathleen
good. Kathleen Turner in this movie as a voice actress is just
my God.
so good.
Uncredited, and I'm not clear why.
Which person
I don't
did
know
they voice?
why. I
Jessica
think
Rabbit.
there's still some, like, it's 1988. You don't want to associate yourself with a cartoon too much if you're trying to be an A-list celebrity at the time. This
That
is
is
pre
true.
Robin Williams doing the Genie, keep in mind.
Yeah, I guess that is true. And there was also, like, a real risk that this was going to be the movie that kills Disney. You know, this was going to be, if this had flopped, like, this would have been
You don't
a
want to
really
push your
serious
name on
problem for
that?
them. Yeah. You know, you got to be careful with that. But having Spielberg on as the producer, like you mentioned, JR, like, nobody had clout the way that Steven Spielberg in 1985 had clout. That guy could get anything done at that point. Everybody was dying to work with him. So he was able to bridge the gaps between all of these crazy corporate rivalries. Now, it wasn't easy. Like, for instance, we have scenes where Warner Brothers characters and Disney characters are sharing the screen, but they had very specific negotiations about how many words each character could speak, and how, like, Bugs couldn't speak more than Mickey, or Daffy couldn't speak more than Donald. You know, so they had to really kind of walk that fine line. But they were able to pull it off.
This is just a rumor. It has never been officially confirmed. But if you look at the behind-the-scenes brouhaha, it seems pretty probable to me. Apparently, there was supposed to be a non-written down handshake agreement. We are letting you have our Warner Brother characters, Disney, someday, and this day may never come. We are going to ask you for a favor in return. Now, on this day, you must give us your Disney characters for our film. And when Warner Brothers made Space Jam, allegedly, never confirmed, but if you look at the behind the scenes, I really do think this happened. They said to Disney, hey, it's only 8 years since Roger Rabbit. We'd like to have your Disney characters make a cameo in Space Jam. Whole new crowd at Disney. Everyone who made Roger Rabbit had moved on to other things. Disney allegedly said, hell no. And since then, zero cooperation. There's never been any crossovers, any smidgen of anything like that.
I absolutely believe it, because even the new Space Jam, which is just like trying to pile on as much IP as possible, it's still all Warner Brothers IP. Like, they weren't able to bring in anything else. And, you know, that is why I argue that Chip and Dale is the closest thing that we've gotten to this. Obviously, a much smaller budget, much worse animation, things like that. But they do have characters from DreamWorks and Disney and Warner Brothers. Like, all
real
coming
quick?
I
together.
don't know, like, if you talk about the sequel, not sequel, the subsequent sort of cultural milestones that, like, come after this movie where you have animation and live action. What do you guys think of Cool World? Or is that a movie we're gonna watch?
We are going to cover Cool World. We are going to cover Cool World down the line. But holy
Spoiler,
shit, that
it
movie is hard to watch.
sucks.
Yeah. Did you guys cover that on 30/20/10 yet? Has
We
that
did.
come out?
We did cover
Yeah.
it last year, and that is not worthy to smell the droppings of Dumbo in Roger Rabbit. Okay.
I've never even heard of it.
Oh man, you are in for a treat when we talk about that.
I have
and
the
subsequent
vaguest
NES game.
recollections. I remember being a child and watching it, and
Watching
remember
Cool World
Brad.
as a child?
My parents were real lax, real lax.
Yeah.
And I just remember Brad Pitt being in it, and like there just being drama. And I remember it not. I was like, this isn't as good as I thought it would be. Like,
I believe the case with that movie was that it was shelved because it was terrible. But then Thelma and Louise happened, and Brad Pitt was suddenly this really hot property, and they're like, all right, we've got this movie with Brad Pitt in it. Let's shove it out. I'm willing to guess that's the case because that movie is unwatchable. But it's at least a fascinating failure. So, like I said, we ran through all the different casting options that they were going for. All of them were too expensive. They ended up going with Bob Hoskins, who is this really respected British character actor. He was just off of a Oscar nomination for the movie Mona Lisa, which is an excellent performance from him in that. And like I said, Spielberg thought he had a film noir-y face, and it seemed like he was up to the acting challenge because, like we already said, like he basically had to invent an entirely new kind of acting in this movie. And I think he still does it better than 90% of the people who have followed in his footsteps. Like, I will argue Bob Hoskins and Brendan Fraser are the two actors in the world that are best at interacting with characters that are not there. Like that's my gauntlet that I'm throwing down.
what makes you think Brendan Fraser?
Look at him in like Looney Tunes Back in Action or in the Mummy movies, things like that. Like he brings a lot of verisimilitude to it because he commits and he can really convey that we're looking at something that isn't
I know
there.
that the guy who voiced Roger Rabbit would dress up in Roger Rabbit's outfit and be behind the camera.
Yeah.
The entire production.
I mean, it is absolutely fascinating. JR can attest. It's fascinating to watch the behind the scenes stuff and see what they do. It's like Roger shaped dummies for sometimes when he's strangling it. Sometimes it's like there's a robot plate smashing machine that kind of like is when the record starts skipping.
If you look when Roger jumps on the bed, the blanket smushes down. So they had to create some type of robot or a grip underneath and being smothered by a mattress for 3 hours to pull it down slightly whenever Roger moved. But again, if that was made today, they just have it all be CGI and it wouldn't look as real.
Personal, so I think each one of us probably has something that we're like, oh my God, this thing is what made me really like love the tech that they did in this movie, the tech and the acting and the care. And mine was when Roger Rabbit touched the back of his dead brother's chair and he left 3 finger marks.
Yes.
I was like,
yeah.
It was so fun. It was
Unbelievable.
So good.
Such a flex too, because at that point, like the first time you're watching it, you're not even thinking about that. You're not even thinking about, how'd they do that, how'd they do it. It's only after subsequent rewatches. And even now, like I said, I've maybe seen this movie 30 times in my life. Even now, there are still little details that I just completely take for granted.
Oh, speaking of details, the jokes per minute and the jokes per minute in like subtle background jokes, like things that you like that hit differently at different ages.
Yeah.
Like it was just like there's so much going on, but you never feel overwhelmed.
No.
And I think that is a very fine line to tread in a comedy when you have so much action and you have this potential like straight man, funny man character. The straight man is, for those who don't know comedy terms, is like a more stoic a character that reacts the base reality, and this fantastic relationship between the two that can be overwhelmed or be ineffective at the slightest drop of the hat, but it works so well in this movie.
No, and it's just all so seamless, and a lot of the credit has to go to the animation director here. I wanted to spend 30 seconds on Richard Williams because this is a fascinating guy. Richard Williams is a British-Canadian animator. He's been around since like the 50s, and he's famously brilliant and famously eccentric, and he hates working in the studio system. So he made most of his money early on, like doing commercials and then animating some short films, some of which got him some Oscar attention. But the bulk of his career from 1964 until 1995 was spent working on his magnum opus, which he was hand animating by himself. It was called The Thief and the Cobbler. And he was trying to get this thing done for 30 plus years. Now, after 20 years of working on it in 1984, he only had about 15 minutes of it done. And he wanted to finish this thing out. And because he kept like bringing demo reels to studios and being told it's too uncommercial, because he wanted it to be a silent film, retelling the Arabian Nights, you know, like it's a weird prospect to try and get off the ground. But he came on as the animation director for this movie in exchange for Disney giving him the money to finish his film and then giving it a release, which technically they did. They gave him the money, they finished the film, they released it. However, they changed it almost entirely. Like, the film that you see now is not really the vision that he wanted, and he still kind of refused. Well, he died a few years ago, but he refused to talk about it for years after that. The final film adds celebrity voice actors, it adds musical numbers, and they gave it like a tiny like single weekend release through the Miramax label because they were worried that the themes would conflict with Aladdin, and they didn't want kids to get those two movies confused. Thief and the Cobbler, you can find it. It's worth tracking down. Sometimes it's called Arabian Night. I just always love that story, the fact that it took somebody 30 years to hand animate this film, and then it just kind of came and went.
And then Disney ruined it.
And then Disney ruined it, as they are wont to do. I agree it's maybe not the most commercial prospect. But,
yeah,
you know.
I've tried to watch it. I've never got through the finished version. Have you?
I have, yeah. I mean, I'm not
Okay.
going to argue it's a great movie, but it's a really fascinating one. And I am interested to see what the version of it that Williams wanted to make would have been. And it's very jarring to see like 60s style animation and 90s style animation like in the same movie. It bounces back and forth from frame to frame sometimes. It's a very odd film.
See, so here's where I will go in. For your listeners who don't know, I am a very minor filmmaker. I have made a film. Film is a collaborative effort. No one person can make a film. And you have to be willing to take in input from other people. And if you don't do that, almost never is the film a great, enjoyable work. And that's what I think the problem with that film is. It's too much one man's vision. He needed collaborators. He needed people to say, well, I get what you're going for, but that doesn't really work. What if we did X, Y, and Z instead?
Yeah, I think you need somebody to kind of like check some of your impulses. George Lucas. Excuse me. Sorry, I got something caught in my throat just there. I don't know what happened.
What?
Well,
You're telling me that Indiana Jones Finding Aliens wasn't fantastic?
The aliens are the least offensive part
Could
of that
have
movie.
worked. It could have worked.
You guys don't know the Boxer opening with JR right now.
No,
He's the
like,
world's biggest indie fan.
I am the biggest. Like, I love Indiana Jones, and when I watched that movie, like the South Park made an entire episode about my feelings.
Oh, God. I can't watch that episode.
But I think the main thing, like, you don't need a CGI gopher in the opening sequence of your show.
Yeah.
Like, that's like, this is the opening sequence world where we have the rolling boulder.
Oh, yeah.
We have I personally love Temple of Doom. Like
The Temple of Doom opening is phenomenal.
The Temple of Doom opening with the musical number and is so fucking good. And then, of course, the Last Crusade opening number with the kids on horseback and just going across like, it's so good.
Yeah.
And then you have an opening number with a CGI gopher.
It's very jarring.
Let's move on.
And let's move on because I can see the rage boiling behind your
That
eyes.
was like a 2003 CG gopher as well.
Well, so this movie finally, it did come together. It wound up being a huge, huge hit, and it kind of it saved Disney's prospects at least a little bit. It was an expensive film, but it was the second highest grossing movie of the year behind only Rain Man. And it just became this massive critical and commercial darling. It was nominated for 7 Oscars. It won like all the technical awards as it should have. And then after that, it was basically radio silence for Roger. We got 2 short films that came out before other Disney films. I think there was one that came out before Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and another before Rescuers Down Under, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, there were 3 of them.
There were 3.
There were 3. So it was Tummy Trouble, Roller Coaster Rabbit, and Trail Mix-Up.
Okay, I think I forgot about
Trail
Roller Coaster
Mix-Up
Rabbit.
came out with a far-off place, and no one remembers that except for Trail Mix-Up.
That's right. Okay, because that was like just kind of a maudlin like teen drama that they were trying to get people into the crowds with the promise of a Roger short.
It's so stupid. Okay, Disney messed this up because the deal they have with Spielberg is he has veto power. He can just say no. And they can't progress with anything Roger Rabbit. And he was like, hey, I'm making this film Arachnophobia. I want a Roger Rabbit short in front of it to bump up my numbers. And Disney went, no, most successful director of all time. We're going to put it in front of our movie instead. What are you going to do about it? Say no to Roger Rabbit for the next 30 years? Ha! I'd like to see that happen.
That is basically what happened. I mean, we literally, again, I'm going to mention it again, but we do not see Roger Rabbit on screen again until Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. He has a cameo in that, doing the Roger Rabbit on the dance floor, appropriately enough. But
so does the Chip and Dale movie canonically take place in the Roger Rabbit universe?
I don't think so. I have no idea, because the whole concept of Toontown has sort of survived beyond the Roger Rabbit movies because of the video game, right? There was that Toontown Online video game that was really
and Toontown Disney World. I mean, it's a natural fit. It's just like, hey, kids, wouldn't it be cool if you could walk around in the same place all your cartoon lives? Yes, Disney, I would like that as a 10-year-old child. Here,
Absolutely.
take my parents' money.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it makes sense, but Roger really kind of got left out of the whole legacy behind that, you know? So it feels like this had such strong sequel potential. I know in 1989, a very, very young J.J. Abrams was actually writing the screenplay for a sequel that was going to take place in World War II. And I think that would be a weird vibe.
That would be a prequel. It takes place in 1947.
It's a prequel, yeah. And Spielberg vetoed it because he was working on a movie called Schindler's List. And he felt that maybe poking fun at Nazis while he's making this very serious Holocaust drama might not be the best vibe. And I think he was probably right about that. But yeah, like you said, JR, it's really hard to make this happen again, especially when everybody is so proprietary about their IP and nobody wants to share. Nobody is willing to figure out the intricacies of all the legal mumbo jumbo that goes into bringing together all the characters like this.
Yeah, it's such a shame.
Before we talk about the movie, the actual substance of the movie a little bit more, I could see a world where this movie failed.
Yeah, of course.
I really love this movie, but that's not a guarantee. A good movie isn't a guarantee of a success. And I was looking at the other movies that came out that year, and I was just trying to figure out why this movie was a success. And like, I guess it's just because it's good, or because it's the animation. Like, it's so good.
I mean, it's doing something on a scale that nobody had really seen before. Because like we'd had animated live action crossovers going back to like Mary Poppins and Bedknobs and Broomsticks and stuff like that, but that always felt like one person is dancing and then cartoons are happening around them, you know. This feels fully integrated. This isn't so much us going into their world except for that one sequence. This is them coming into our world, which is much harder to pull
That
off.
weasel had a Tommy gun.
The weasel had a gun. Yeah, I mean,
let's talk about other reasons this could never be made today. There are guns in a kids movie, and they save the day. There's a scene where Eddie Valiant gets cigarettes from children.
Yeah.
And Jessica Rabbit is an incredible sexual creature in this film.
All right.
Disney does not know what to do with Jessica Rabbit today, even though she's been a success for 35 years. Okay?
We need to talk about Jessica Rabbit here.
Is-
Jessica Rabbit is so iconic for so many reasons, but she is so unlike anything that Disney has ever produced before or since. Like, she is such a singularly weird
She has her
creature.
roots in Betty Boop, and that
sure.
Betty Boop in that outfit, like in that scene, was a very like homage to. And there were sexy women that the wolf whistled at in the classic cartoons, but Jessica Rabbit definitely takes it up a notch, and especially singing "Why Don't You Do Right." In such a sultry voice.
Yeah.
Like, it's definitely like the entire thing was like it's more provocative than a lot of overtly provocative
Now,
scenes.
having seen this movie when I was a young child, as many people did,
Yeah.
Was this movie the origin of jiggle physics?
Kinda?
I mean, okay. So, listeners, the reason Jessica Rabbit's jiggles seem so unusual is because the animators watched the jiggling of real breast and then made it so that Jessica's breast jiggled in the reverse motion.
Interesting. So they're constantly like perking up.
I swear, boss, I'm doing research.
Yeah,
But,
what intern gets that job?
I thought they did a remarkable job on the sparkly nature of her dress as well. I read that they had to shine light through a plastic bag somehow to get the sequins to shine.
I've been reading about that for 35 years and I still don't understand it. I'm like, what? How? Okay, I don't get it.
Yeah, it makes her all the more surreal that like the fabric of her dress does not seem to be of the same reality that she is. Like, it's clinging to her obviously in all the right ways, but it is not
All the
on
right
her body
ways.
in a particular way. Look, I'm not going to go into all the prepubescent effects that Jessica Rabbit had on me, but you know,
I will say this. She was probably my sexual awakening.
I mean, that's not unusual.
It's
That is not
either Who
unusual.
Framed Roger Rabbit or The Mummy.
Yeah,
the Mummy.
the Mummy's a big. I've heard the Mummy cited as a big bisexual awakening because just everybody in that movie's hot. But yeah, no, for sure, and I think that's a common sentiment with her, and she really stands out as the most iconic character. I mean, looking at the cover of the NES video game, she's the most prominent character on there. Like, she's not even a playable character in the game, but it's a big Jessica Rabbit with Roger poking his head up behind her.
And
even
she was
Go ahead.
she was the logo of Pleasure Island for decades, you know, in Disney World. And
I did
you
not
can
know
still
that.
find Jessica Rabbit merch, even though Disney wants nothing to do with it. They
Yeah.
can't stop it. The fans, 35 years later, still want everything to do with Jessica Rabbit. And, you know, let's just say if I had to bet who has the most Rule 34 out there in the world, I'd put some money on Jessica.
I mean, they've already done so much of the work for us, you know, like it's already there. But I guarantee, like, I would like to see like an 8-episode Jessica Rabbit Disney Plus series. You know, like I want to see what's up with this character, and like I want to see it recontextualized.
Again, another reason why they couldn't make this movie today is that Jessica Rabbit takes off the dude's pants.
She takes off pants, yeah. She shines a guy's head in a very provocative way. Like I don't know. I like to be
But-
made to feel like a little bowling ball.
She's actually a wonderful character too.
Yes,
I mean,
yeah, she is, yeah.
she has a depth. She has motivation. She's smart. She's living in her world. She's doing the best. She has agency. She has everything you would want in a femme fatale character with a heart of gold. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
That's a great setup. That like we were made to believe that she is the femme fatale archetype this entire movie, and getting that great little twist of her actually being sweet and in love with Roger, which makes that bit all the funnier because the whole gag is obviously like, why would she ever want to be with Roger? So obviously, like, she's two-timing him. Obviously, like, the rabbit's just like oblivious. But no, she genuinely loves him and like is a very loyal, caring wife to him.
I love when they're in Toontown and they come out and the car's trashed and she goes, "Guess we'll have to take your car." And he goes, "Somebody already did." And she's like, "Oh, my Roger was never that good at driving."
Yeah. See, just little affectionate things like that. Yeah, I mean, it is a really
She
sweet character.
loves Roger, 100%.
No, and it's very sweet.
In fact, she loves him enough that the entire reason that there is a movie is because she's willing to potentially, and like it's pretty clear that they both probably knew that they would be able to make up afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
But she's like, I'm going to save his career.
Yeah.
Like, I have to do something here.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, like this definitely hits all of the film noir archetype beats without making it feel super winky. This doesn't feel like they're joking about like film noir. They're making a straight film noir. And if there are wacky comedic moments in it, that's because in this reality, wacky comedic moments are breaking out all the time. It doesn't mean that your investigation isn't serious all of a sudden. It's just the world you live in.
And some...
So
Go ahead.
there was a sequel to Chinatown, and there
Yes,
was a
the two
planned
Jakes.
conclusion to the Chinatown trilogy. And that conclusion was all about Cloverleaf ending the streetcar system.
Yeah.
This is the conclusion to the Chinatown trilogy.
They should have called it the Three Jakes. That way I wouldn't be confused. We need more Jakes in this thing. Yeah. Yeah, it kind of is. That's crazy. Like, yeah, no, it is digging into that real thing that happened in L.A. where the trolley cars were dismantled and replaced with freeways, you know. So making life in L.A. infinitely better. I'm sure everyone in L.A. can attest. It's very easy to get around and a lot of
But
fun.
I can guarantee you that almost everybody in LA needs a car.
Yes, they do.
One of the things that I also thought was interesting about this movie, and it's one of the reasons why, like, I like film noir, but then at times, like, so many film noir movies that I've seen, and I'm by far not an expert, are a little or a lot misogynistic. To sometimes
bit. Maybe a tiny
exceptional levels of misogyny. And this
I'm
movie,
assuming, J-Ben, you're laughing because you strongly disagree.
yeah,
I've never heard that before.
this movie does a good job of, like, even when Valiant is being a little, like, he hits that line a little bit with his love interest. However, it's
yeah.
still very clear the entire time that both of them are in on the joke.
Yeah.
And it's...
Yeah.
Well, I think this comes to the brilliance of casting Bobby H. Because if you had Harrison Ford, you kind of want Harrison Ford to flirt
Be
with
the bad boy?
Jessica Rabbit, like by having somebody who is like is not interested in a tune, and like is not well. And I don't know. There's something about. So this almost all film noir has this weird thing where like smacking a broad around is like a thing.
Yeah.
And it's just like, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Well, you're
Stop
hysterical,
it.
sweetheart. You
That's
calm
what
down.
will turn me off of a lot of film noir, because I'm just like, all right, well, now I hate the character that I'm stuck following.
Yeah.
Because I'm not down with that. Even when we were playing the game, you can punch people, and I was just like about to wail off and sack somebody in the face, and then I realized, oh shit, that's not a dude, that's a woman.
Justin, you
I'm
horrid
gonna go
man.
to the next room and punch that guy. Or I think I punched the guy out front.
Well, he'll just tell you to buzz off.
Wait, before we get to the game, we should
Yeah.
still,
But yeah.
because like this. So this movie does like have a really solid heart, like a really solid core.
Yeah.
And having like it's so because like with a lesser actor talking about how your brother died from having a piano dropped on his head is a fucking punchline, but it's not a punchline here. You know, it is.
It's
but it
funny.
It's not.
It is funny. It's still
funny.
funny, but you also do understand the gravitas behind it.
It's
you know?
also when they first reveal that what's his name had been killed by the safe being dropped on him.
Sure.
There was that moment where I don't think I ever caught the person's name, but it's like the LAPD detective. Zantino. Where he's like, he made a joke about it, and then he looks and goes, oh, sorry. And then, like, Valiant actually seemed a little like, bro, come on.
It's like, dude, come on, watch.
Like, look, my brother died very similarly to this.
Yeah, and I mean, Eddie, like all good film noir heroes, is a flawed kind of anti-hero. Not even necessarily an anti-hero, but he's got his flaws, he's got his demons, and he's got his prejudices that he needs to overcome.
Alcoholism,
which he cures pretty easily. Turns out all you need to do is just dump it and shoot the bottle.
With Wile E. Coyote's gun, which in that scene was animated, and in the following scenes was not animated. That was a practical.
That's the one slight little cheat, is that when he's in Toontown, you can see he's just holding like the big, thick physical gun.
Is this where I throw the wrench in?
Uh-oh.
I fucking hated Roger Rabbit.
Really?
Oh, interesting.
I don't know if it's just my particular neurodivergence, but I hate most things that I watch when there's just somebody who is irrationally, situationally just dumb.
Yeah,
like,
I don't know the point of him being a
I know,
tune.
I know that's the point.
Justifies.
I know,
Right.
but it's still
Let's-
just a thing that always grates on me.
Let's
no matter
drill
what
down
it is.
to one specific scene. Roger Rabbit is in the handcuffs, and they're going through all this wackiness. And then Eddie Valiant is sawing the handcuff, and then Roger says, "Okay, let me take my hand out."
Yeah,
and Eddie Valiant
does this
says,
help?
"Could you do that at any time?" And Roger Rabbit says, "No, only when it was funny." Okay, was Roger Rabbit literally speaking the truth? Is his superpower as a toon that he could not do that unless it was funny?
I think it's like dancing. I think that tunes hear the beat of comedy and then they move at the beat of comedy. And so, like, exactly like he has to do the knocks,
Yeah.
you know, he has. I don't think they picked that. The microphone picked that up. But imagine
He did the knocks.
I'm doing the knocks. And it's just like, because he has to respond to it, just like he has to respond to the timing when the record skips. So I think being a tune is very much like playing by a song that no one else hears.
Yeah. I mean, I like to. I have always read it that it is like that he is being literal, that it is compulsive, that is like literally he would not have been able to get out of those handcuffs unless it would have been funny. But that raises a lot of questions about, like, is he playing to us, the audience, or is he thinking that this is going to be funny for Eddie? Because Eddie did not find it funny. So, like, subjectively, is it just need to be funny to him? I don't know. It opens up a lot of doors.
It felt a little bit cathartic when he was drowning him in the sink.
You
But,
know,
like,
it's so funny that you say this, because I have to say I'm sometimes on the same page as you when it comes to grading characters, but I don't find Roger Rabbit to be grading, and I don't know whether or not that's because I was exposed to this when I was a child. I definitely found Bobby H to be funnier than I remembered. Like, I do find myself as an adult laughing more at Bobby H
because that's more like us now.
Yeah.
Well,
We're
like when I was
becoming
a child,
jaded
I
humans.
definitely loved laughing at the cartoons. One thing to go back to the misogyny, I don't mind Jessica Rabbit. What I fucking hate is Baby Herman slapping that woman on the ass.
Yes.
I fucking
forgot
hate
about
it.
that.
And
Again,
it's just like,
intentional, I think.
I don't know, it's
we're
definitely
supposed to think it's
intentional.
yeah.
We're
It's-
meant. It's coding for the audience that even though this character is a baby, he's a horrible garbage human being or toon.
Yeah, no, I
or that he
completely
is
agree, and I
literally
got
a man
that.
in his 30s who
but
just presents as
a lot
baby.
of people might bring up other aspects of this movie, and I don't I don't really have a problem. Like, I really like Jessica Rabbit's character, and I thought, like, I really like a lot of what they do with Jessica Rabbit, but I don't know, the whole that I don't know. There's
On the plus side, not again. I feel similarly. I had actually forgotten about that moment, and as soon as you said his name, I was like, "Oh, right, he is that little shit." deserved to be kicked down the elevator.
I think
He
for me,
deserved to
this might
lose
actually-
his stogie.
Yeah. At least we know no real woman was harmed
No, but
because he wasn't real.
for me,
Unlike sometimes where that at least looks like that
You're
was a
pounding
real
your
slap.
fist.
Yes.
Stop it.
I think for me, like, see, you got the dogs going. For me, I always feel like Baby Herman is maybe the least creepy talking baby in film history. Like, I hate a talking baby. I will take Baby Herman over the Boss Baby any goddamn day of the week.
I will clarify that and say that he is the biggest creep talking baby.
Yeah.
But he is not the creepiest talking baby.
No, the biggest creep talking baby is the one from the E-Trade commercials, who's like always talking about like hitting on other women at the office. Like, I hate.
I don't think I've ever seen
I
this.
don't remember those commercials.
They tried to make a sitcom off of him called
Oh,
Bob the
no.
Baby. It was unwatchable. Anyway,
probably
that's
for the best.
that's our Bob the Baby minute here. Yeah, but going
30
back to
seconds of
Roger,
fame.
like that is a complaint I've heard a lot about this movie is that Roger is kind of annoying. And I've never found Roger annoying. Like, obviously it's a huge performance, you know, and Charles Fleischer, who does the voice, must have done some unbelievable damage to his vocal cords doing some of those screams. Think about that scream that he has in the opening. Well, basically the opening 4 minutes is just sustained high-pitched screaming. As Roger's like running around like trying to prevent the baby from catching itself on fire. Like, I feel bad for what his voice must have been like after a day in the studio there. But I think it's a good performance. I think Roger is he's going so big because Hoskins is going so small. Like, I think we need those wild contrasts to see just how alien these two worlds are.
It's funny you mention that because that opening scene is the scene that reminded me of how much I was about to dislike Roger Rabbit.
Oh.
And like, again, I'll preface this by saying, like, I understand that was the intent of the character to some degree.
Yeah.
And like, I don't hate the movie because of it.
No.
But man, was he just irritating the hell out of me.
Yeah.
Like, near the end, he got better because he started actually helping.
Yeah.
And if you are trying to help and making mistakes, and to me that is okay.
Yeah.
But if you're supposed to be laying low because you're wanted for murder and they come back to the bar and you're putting on a show for everyone, maybe you suck.
But that's the point.
Okay,
I don't know,
but
his-
that's
people are
who
flawed.
he is.
People are
He has a
flawed.
compulsive need to make people laugh, and his whole speech about how sometimes laughter is the only thing we have in this world. That's who he is. He needs to make you laugh.
Look,
And he needs to be that obstacle for Eddie at the same time because Eddie is so opposite in every way, but they have these shared interests, and so he needs to kind of be wrangling him to add tension to the stakes.
What about? I really loved Benny the Car.
Yeah, Benny the Car,
Benny the
also
Car-
Charles Fleischer. Yeah,
But really, I didn't
Yeah,
know that.
Yeah, he did both. Yeah, I believe it was originally supposed to be Jim Belushi, and he couldn't make it the last minute, so Charles Fleischer did both.
like, hey, you're already here. Do you mind
Yeah.
being in a car too?
Yeah, I think he did a great job. Yeah, it's a really that sequence is still so amazing because again, no cheats. Like, you are seeing a human man driving down a human street in an animated car, and this was like where they built kind of a little go-kart, right? Like in real life, like he's just kind of driving a go-kart with a green screen mounted to it.
And they'd use that in Back to the Future 2 and 3.
Oh, I didn't know
Oh.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I believe it. Yeah, I mean, it's a great little chase sequence in the middle, and I love the logic of having a cartoon car chase. Like, they really stick with it. They have levers that'll make your car grow, and wisecracking cabs and everything like that. Yeah, no, Benny is great.
All right. This is my final thing on thing they would never do today, because they'd never build a go-kart today. They wouldn't
No.
do that. They would
No.
all be green screen. In the Ink and Paint Club, they built that club 8 feet off the ground so the puppeteers could hold the trays that the cartoon animals were holding. And it works. I mean, you are in the
Never
Ink and
would have
Paint
noticed it.
Club.
Never would have
when
guessed.
when Jessica Rabbit does her performance, you can believe that she's up there on stage. And by God, is this an amazing film? It's a movie about a bygone era made in a time that is now a bygone era with tech that doesn't even remotely look like it's a bygone era.
Yeah. It's unbelievable.
That's the crazy thing to me, because I was going to go to school for post-production, doing special effects and stuff. Didn't work out. But I at least like understand enough to know, like, I know how you would do it in modern day times in order to try to get stuff like parallax and the actual like angles to line up on everything.
Yeah.
But they were still cutting film.
Yeah.
And piecing things together. They didn't have anywhere near as much of luxuries to do that. And so for them to get it so right with so little tools, doing everything the hardest way that we in modern times could think of, is great. They did such a good job that there was... Obviously, it was a cartoon, so you get a little bit of suspension of disbelief. But even then, it was rare that there was a moment that they felt out of place unless they were supposed to.
The production, like the behind the scenes stuff, kind of has a little bit of the energy of like something like Mythbusters for me, because it's that whole idea of people with a whole lot of enthusiasm and a whole lot of technical ability trying to solve a really weird specific problem and having a great time doing it.
Fun fact, you know that's what they did before Mythbusters, right?
Yeah, of course.
They were special effects artists,
yeah,
and they did all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and so it kind of carries that energy.
It's so interesting because I feel like one of the reasons that this movie works so well is that they establish the stakes early on with the devastating moment of the shoe. When the actual the scene where you have this goo that can murder all the Toontown, and you've got Roger and Jessica like hanging and constantly they're safe, they're not safe, they're safe, they're not safe, and I just feel like that scene works so well, and I feel like that scene is the only scene where you can sort of see the edges of the practical effects in the destruction of Judge Doom. And I watched this on a really big screen, high def, so I was like, so that was the only moment in the entire rewatch that I was like, oh, okay, maybe this was a little dated, but other than that, it completely holds up. And I love the way they kill Dr. Doom with the Toon death of a steamroller, and then the dip, which he desperately deserved.
Can I just point out where I come from?
Dr. Doom,
being
Judge Doom,
the countryside. Dip is chewing tobacco.
Yes.
And so every time they said it, I had to have that moment where I'm like, "Oh, right, the goo."
I think I would rather be dipped in the dip from this movie than to be dipped in the dip from
for sure.
Can of Skull. Yeah. I think I would rather.
Yeah, no, that stuff is disgusting. But
have you ever tried it?
No,
I haven't either. I think it's like I've never done any tobacco products.
Like I've seen it, I've smelt it. Didn't need to go any further than that.
I smoked cigarettes for like 6 years, and even then would not go near the dip. I don't know.
Yeah. But no, it was. They do so many things well in terms of like pacing and setting the stakes, because up at the front you're like, this guy will straight up murder people on a whim. And he's gunning for that rabbit.
He's got a real chill vibe. He's really cool with everybody, and everyone just likes him, you know? Yeah, I mean, there's really... They don't try to make any mystery in this movie about who the villain is, because obviously it's going to be this guy. Like, it'd be a great twist if he was not the villain.
Those weasels were so creepy.
Weasels are creepy, yeah.
Yeah. He could have not been the villain, but he was, regardless, a villain from the start. And, like, when he turns out to be the villain, you're like, fair?
All right,
he seems like a villain.
The one final sequence I want to talk about, because I want to move on to the game. I have so much to say about this game as well. But the one final sequence that I would be remiss if we did not talk about was Toontown. Such an iconic sequence. Always my favorite when I was a kid. Now, I think I tend to prefer everything around it, because Toontown is the one moment where there's not a whole lot of mystery about how they did it. It's Bob Hoskins on a green screen. We understand how that works now. But there is still a whole lot of joy going into all of these sequences. I love how these do feel like a cartoon. They feel like a classic like Saturday morning cartoon that we grew up on. But there is some grittiness to Toontown that I think it gets lost in the Disneyland attraction and the game where everything's just bright and sunny and colorful. There are back alleys in Toontown. Like there's grain to things. There's texture. Things are falling apart. Things are ugly. Like I really appreciate the level of detail that they put into
and
the building of
danger.
Toontown.
There's constant danger everywhere in Toontown.
Especially for somebody who's not seemingly invincible.
Except apparently you are. So like I guess that's the thing. Like Toons.
What? No. Eddie Valiant could have totally died in Toontown in multiple points. When he's falling from a great height, he is in fear of his life.
Okay. Oh, I guess he does get caught.
Yep.
But I was thinking about him in the elevator when the elevator starts going up really fast and he shrinks down into a puddle. Like he can physically adapt to the world in Toontown the way Toons cannot. Like Toons are just Toons always. But he becomes a Toon when he goes into Toontown. But yeah, apparently, he can die.
There was that one part in the factory where he absolutely gets dropped from a great height, and they literally just cut away and then cut back to him not falling.
No.
And I was like, because he would have died, and if you would have showed us that sequence, we would have went, huh.
Oh, like his head in the light fixture? Yeah.
Yeah, where he goes up, his head hits the light fixture, gets electrocuted, and then it just cuts away, and then it cuts back, and he's fine,
So,
not dead on the floor.
The physics are like
Electricity
flexible.
won't always kill you.
He was on the ceiling of a warehouse.
Yeah. I don't know. The physics are flexible, but I just wanted to shout out that sequence. I think it's unbelievable. I have to transition to this game now because
Do you have to?
we gotta.
Yeah.
For
Well,
whatever
we got an
reason,
expert, so
I think we're noticing that like the higher quality the movie that we watch, the lower quality the game. We've really struggled with E.T., with Vertigo, with Jaws, and now we're gonna struggle a lot with Who Framed Roger Rabbit, the game. This came out in September of 1989. It's exclusive for the NES. Before we get to talk about the game, I think it's worth mentioning that this is one of the first handful of games from Rare. Those who
That was surprising when you mentioned it.
Yeah. Rare are legendary video game developers who made Donkey Kong Country and GoldenEye and Banjo-Kazooie and Viva Pinata. So many games that are, I'm going to say, better than this one. I'm going to argue that maybe this game isn't up to their usual standards.
Maybe.
But there are a couple different versions of Roger Rabbit in video games, which all kind of end up going away in the after the early 90s. But we have this game. We have a PC game, which is more of a straight up like first person point and click adventure. There's a Game Boy game. And then Roger Rabbit gets tied up in the weird ass Crazy Castle series. Do you know about Crazy Castle, JR?
I do.
It's depending on which sequel you're playing or what part of the world you're in, it's going to be a wildly different character representing it. So in the States, it was Bugs Bunny. But over in Japan, it was Roger Rabbit. And then it was Mickey Mouse. And then in Europe, it was Garfield, Felix the Cat, and Ghostbusters. So like depending on which version of which game you were playing, you're getting all of those characters.
These sound like wildly different games.
And they're all just the games about like going upstairs and opening doors. Like they're pretty boring action puzzle platformer games.
Wild.
It was similar to this game actually. All right. So JR, this is one that you grew up with.
I did. So I remember bringing this game along on a couple of visits to my grandma's house. So, you know, she was an elderly woman. She didn't really care what I did. So it was like, okay, grandson, plug in your Atari. It's a Nintendo, Grandma. Whatever. And just play it as much as you enjoy. Okay. So playing Roger Rabbit again and again and again because I started playing it when there was no strategy guide. I mean, this is a dense game. You have to like figure out so much on your own. And I remember going around to every single building again and again and again, searching everything, fighting the weasels. So listeners, this is kind of an open world game as much as a 1991 NES game can be. So
yeah,
you go around. Go ahead.
We really struggled trying to figure out how to classify this game and how to get into it, because I guess really this is sort of like a point-and-click adventure game to a degree, more so than like a platformer.
It's a point-and-click adventure game with randomized loot and randomized enemies where you have to use your action buttons. And the action is not that exciting.
This is where we ran into trouble, because usually, like in some of these games, we'll start them up, and if we're struggling to figure out what to do, obviously, let's hop onto the old Wikifacts or whatever. Let's look up a walkthrough. The first walkthrough I find says, "Oh, by the way, I'm not going to be able to tell you where any of these items are because everything in this game is randomized, so it's going to be in a different place every time." So the whole thrust of this game is that you're controlling Eddie Valiant, and you have Roger kind of just buzzing uselessly around you the entire
Getting hit by cars.
Getting hit
and
by
causing
cars.
problems.
I'm slightly amazed in retrospect that you could have an AI sidekick in your NES game at the time. That's kind of surprising.
AI might be a bit of a stretch with Roger. Like, he doesn't do anything. He comes into the frame, he walks back and forth, and he poses an obstacle, because when you're in the overworld map, he can get snatched by crows or by weasels.
Or by cars.
Or run over by cars.
My Roger got ran over a lot, which is why I say it.
So... Yeah. For people familiar with point-and-click adventure games, it's a progression. It's find this item to unlock this door, which will lead to this item, which will give you this clue, which will et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this game is exactly that.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt,
No,
but something
please.
that I always talk about in all of these things is my reflections on gaming music. And the score of the actual movie, I think it's Silvestri, I want to say.
Yes.
Amazing.
Fantastic.
Great song choice, great score. The song on this game is so repetitive and so annoying, I had to turn the sound off. I could not deal with the fucking score for this video game.
This is the first time we had to actually kill the sound, because something about that really short snippet of music that was playing in a constant loop as we were trying and failing to figure out what to do was really hammering it home. Yeah, because like we were saying, it's a game where you need to, your first task is to go to the club, right? You're going to the club.
Na 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 na.
Did it get burned into your memory?
It was
100
burned,
plus hours.
Burned into my brain. I mean,
this is exactly what we were worried about.
I legit think I might have played this more total hours than I played Skyrim.
Oh my god. No. Oh my god.
Okay, you got to remember what it was like in 1988. You got one NES game for your birthday and one NES game for Christmas, and that was it.
Yep.
And I was such a huge Roger fan that this was just like my instant buy. So, again, there was no other way to live in the Roger Rabbit world other than this game. So I threw myself into it again and again and again. And we'll get to why I played it multiple times at the end. Hint, why is not punching Judge Doom a meme? That should totally be like internet slang at this point for some incredibly hard video game thing that is not worth a reward.
Absolutely not. Yeah, so the progression of this game, you go to the Ink and Paint Club, you need to get in, but you need the password. The password is written on a piece of paper. The only way to find that piece of paper is to go to one of several dozen identical gray block buildings, wander around inside, and talk to people. Now, if they tell you there's something to find here, great. You can look around in this location until you find something. Sometimes it's on the floor. You can just pick it up. Great. Other times, it's hidden in one of many dresser drawers, mouse holes, potted plants, things that you have to interact with. Now, interacting with them means walking up close to them, pressing the search button, and waiting like 3 to 4 seconds as the screen says searching, only to turn up nothing. That was the majority of our experience, to the point where we thought the game was broken. We went to every building. We talked to every person. We could not find this scrap of paper anywhere.
Not only could we not find the scrap of paper anywhere, but we found like 3 things total.
Yeah, like and they were all fish bones.
And like we put a solid how long into it?
About an hour.
About an hour at least.
I mean, we put
Obviously,
half an
you
hour
are not
until play.
1988 kids who are free time millionaires. Because an hour, fat. I laugh at your time.
You do an hour in your sleep. That's
wild.
So this is interesting. So with this game, like for people who've played Skyrim, there's always a time where you play it to like 4 or 5 in the fucking morning and you're like strung out. Did you get strung out on this game?
Yeah, I did because I was going to every single building. And there was no way to push a fast forward button in the searching, so I was searching. And then the goddamn weasels would come up, and I'd have to fist fight them or figure out their dumb, stupid dad jokes before dad jokes were, a popular thing.
This is such a weird mechanic. Yeah, every once in a while the weasels will pop out, they'll grab Roger, and you could stop them from killing him if you can give them the punchline to a bad joke. You cycle through a couple of options and you give the punchline that makes the most sense. They'll start laughing and they'll let you go. Like, I will give this game props for being actually designed around the movie. A lot of these games that we encounter are just like shovelware that they slapped a title on and they just said, okay, good enough. And it's not really related to
I don't
anything.
remember Jessica Rabbit doing the dip. Or
Yes,
The dab.
Jessica
The
Rabbit
dab.
Sorry,
running
the dab.
around.
Yeah,
like-
Jessica Rabbit was in permanent dab.
Yes.
Either that or she was doing the vampire. I don't know.
Yeah, that's her act is insane apparently in this. She just walks her once you finally get into the club. She just walks around back and forth like with her arms in a weird position until you drop a rose and she gives you information. Like it's a lot of fetch questy stuff like that. And that's annoying enough in a lot of point and click games when things are fixed and consistent. But when you just never know where the item that you desperately need to advance is going to pop up, that's unbelievably agonizing. Like, I could see why you could sink so much time into it.
I
Before I
don't see how
forget-
you could sink so much time in it because this game drove me crazy. I was longing for
Look.
ET. I was like, bring back ET.
You mentioned Skyrim, but 2 games before that, Morrowind, was great because you didn't have quest markers, you didn't have quest lines. You had a linear journal that you had to page back through and be like, all right, how long ago did I last work on the quest I wanted to do? Who is that guy I was talking to? Is their name in this journal anywhere? Where am I? Where am I going? You have to read street signs. It was great. But before I forget, can the thumbnail for this week's just be Jessica Rabbit dabbing?
I don't think
I'll
the
try and pull that up.
pixel art is so bad on almost everyone except for I think Roger Rabbit's okay.
For 1988, this is
Yeah,
good
look.
pixel art. You got to give that.
You
with
could
an
tell the cars
asterisk.
were cars.
I don't know. I've seen some like. We can't talk about the Willow episode because it's lost. But I really liked the
Doesn't
Willow
exist,
episode, and like the Willow game, I thought was really fun.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just did not find this game to be fun, and maybe I'm taking it out on the pixel art, but I just don't know. And Jessica Rabbit, you wait to see Jessica Rabbit, and then she's doing this weird dab thing. I don't know.
She
What were you
legitimately
wanting?
just
full
walks
motion
around.
video and 60 frames per second.
At least-
I'm not. I
I
don't
want a
need
dragon's
that.
lair. Yeah, all of a sudden.
At least
yeah.
not a pose. She was in a constant pose with one arm, like her left arm way out and her right arm like legitimately doing a dab.
I wonder if they were doing that to hide her cleavage.
Oh, I'm wondering. That one extra line would have been too titillating, I think.
Get it?
It might have taken 2-3 pixels even. Yeah.
Apologies, listeners, for my hiccups have returned.
That's all right. We'll try and really scare you. Roger Rabbit for NES. That did it. This also has one of my least favorite gaming conventions, which is wandering into a pitch dark cave that has a bunch of invisible pitfalls, and you need to like find some special magical item to advance. I always hated that.
I actually didn't mind that. Like watching the walkthrough, I thought it just seemed like maybe we were unlucky in our playthrough because like maybe we should just reloaded it because we found 3 things in a half an hour.
Yeah, let me ask JR about that. Like, how much of this is just like, how many like just bum runs did you have, like where you just showed up and nothing came up?
Okay, it's 35-year-old memories.
Yes,
but a fuck ton, maybe like 11 fuck tons, because I had nothing else to do. This was my only game for the next 6 months, so I played it again and again and again, and I died and I died and I died, and then I kept searching around, and then I searched around. I think eventually Nintendo Power came out with some hints, so I was like, okay, I've got some vague sense, and then I remember getting into Toontown as being like, holy fucking Christ! I've achieved it. I've gotten past. You need dynamite to blow up the tunnel, and then you go through the tunnel, and it takes a whole lot of searching, and you got to find it all over the place. But you find it, and then you're in Toontown, and then you solve some more things, and then eventually you have to fight Judge Doom, and that's where all my memories are at.
Okay. All right.
So,
all right. Yeah.
How did you have to? How many times of dying playing Judge Doom did you have to do before you had to? Did you have to redo everything?
All the times. Yes. Yeah, you got this like ungodly long save code, and I remember like one time writing down, an O instead of a 0, and just like fucking my save code up and losing everything and being like, there is no God. And I remember building up my character and getting everything I needed to fight Judge Doom and just failing.
Yeah.
And failing. And failing. And then I remember being in like some bookstore and flipping through one of those like 900-page how to beat Nintendo game things. I don't know if you remember those. And it was like, Roger Rabbit, how to defeat Judge Doom. Don't suck. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I mean,
it's Elden Ring rules. Yeah.
Yeah. It's Judge Doom is the Dark Souls of NES games. Okay, because you have to go up there. You've got these like punching gloves. You've got these portable holes, and you throw them all at him, and he just like laughs at them. He's just like, "I'm Judge Doom, bitch." And then you have to hit him again and again and again, and you've got to keep. And if he like hits you once, you're dead. It's like not even fair. It's like you have to.
It's hard to describe this fight because it's got a weird kind of like life bar where you each have like a meter that's moving towards the middle, like the more damage you take, right?
Yeah. And
like, I wasn't totally clear what was happening.
I just remember doing it an ungodly number of times, and then one time when I was like on the exact right combination of Mountain Dew and Doritos, everything went my way, and I just was like the Matrix code flipped around me, and I could see I wasn't even pushing the buttons just were being pushed, and Judge Doom went down, and I get this like punk ass bitch, congratulations, you saved the day. The fuck.
I mean, you could at least count your lucky stars it was spelled correctly. Like that's all you could hope for.
At least at the end of Blues Brothers, this band that you literally know nothing about plays music.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, that was the whole reward that you were getting for putting all these hours into games like this back in the day. It's just like a brief little paragraph, not even an image.
Well, you did
Your princess
see,
is in another castle.
Roger Rabbit and Jessica like fall down, and then it said, "Toontown is saved and remains in the hands of its rightful owners, the Toons." The end.
You didn't even get a fanfare of music because the music is so bad.
Yes, yeah, they couldn't be bothered to write more than 8 notes.
Does it haunt your dreams?
Oh god, yeah, pretty unbelievably terrible game. Like, Again, I'm giving it some slight props just because it tried to do something a little. I think the lazy quick option is just like, all right, side-scrolling hop and bop platformer. But honestly, I would have preferred a side-scrolling hop and bop platformer. Like it would have made more sense. It would have been more propulsive. This decision to randomize your items just absolutely destroys any potential.
It made Wayne's World look good.
It made Wayne's World the game look
We
good.
we played for about 30 minutes, and then we pulled up a walkthrough that was an hour long, and we watched that at two times speed. And the amount of times that we literally just went, "Oh, come on!
Yeah.
What? How
Like-
come he got?" We searched everything in like 2 or 3 different buildings. He got literally nothing, even though the people in the building were telling us, "Search this building."
Yeah.
And they just the first time they searched something, boom, they got it.
It's
And I'm
a
like,
game that's kind of impossible to speed run because you could either like beat this in like 20 minutes or it would take like 20 hours. You know, there's really no telling.
and the
There's
fact
like
that literally
tool-assisted speed runs out there where they like program the computer to say, "Okay, give me every item in the first 3 buildings," and then
Yeah.
it's like a 6-minute game.
Yeah, exactly. You could like blaze right through it if that's the
yeah,
case.
every building is identical. There's like 4 buildings that aren't, and they aren't important.
But yeah, not
Or they don't seem to be
immediately.
very
It's like the
important.
gag factory and things like that. Yeah.
And so it's like you're just going from generic hotel to generic hotel to generic hotel to generic hotel to, oh, this one's a shop?
Yeah. But you can't really keep it straight just looking at the overworld map because they went so monochromatic with it. And bizarre mess. Like I was not expecting the game to be quite as bad as it wound up being. I think that might be a good time to transition to our final thoughts here. Did we have any final things we wanted to say about Roger Rabbit the game?
Just that there has been no Roger Rabbit the game since the 1991 Game Boy adaptation of this
Yeah.
game, and that's a crime. Roger Rabbit lends himself to the video game environment, especially with your modern day, perfectly. Disney, give me my open world Toontown where I play Eddie Valiant going around solving case after Toon case. Holy crud, wouldn't that be exciting? Wouldn't that be awesome?
There's a lot you could do with it. Like even when they made Toontown Online, like Roger just was not a part of it. Like Mickey and Donald and all of them were, but Roger was just kind of left out. So it is weird that this property has just been sitting unused on the floor for 30 years now. I hope they find something to do with it in the future. I really do, because I think that first movie is so special. It's so unique. It's such a masterful accomplishment. And then in direct proportion to that is the NES game that is so weird, so broken, and just does not work.
Look, I watched Roger Rabbit get hit by a car so many times,
Yeah.
and I don't feel bad about that.
No, I feel nothing for this, Roger Rabbit. Well, let's move on to our final rankings. Each week we are saying if this is a good movie, good game, a bad movie, bad game, or something in between. Now, you guys probably have ascertained where I'm coming down on this one. It's a great movie, terrible game. It's like one of the widest disparities that we've seen so far, like I would argue. How about you, J-Man?
Great movie, I mean, it hasn't unseated. It hasn't unseated Vertigo.
It hasn't. Okay, I thought it might be down to.
But
a
it's
coin
close.
flip. Yeah.
It's very close. Yeah, it's so bad. It's so bad. Like there's so much color and beauty in Toontown and in Roger the Rabbit, and they just fail to bring it to the game, like the fun aspects, except for the Weasel mini game. I did like the Weasel mini game.
Oh yeah. And Justin, where are you coming down on this?
Good movie, bad game.
There you go. All right. You always keep it nice and concise. I appreciate that. Also, the hiccups are forcing
I almost
me to.
never do, but
I'm coming
yes.
down. The film is literally a masterpiece for your listeners who don't know. When in medieval times, when someone was trying to attain the rank of master jeweler, master builder, master furniture maker, they would take one piece that they made and submit it to the guild and say, this shows that I have reached the rank of master. Roger Rabbit can absolutely be submitted to show that Zemeckis reached the position of a master filmmaker. It is a masterpiece. Couldn't be made today. I wish we got more Roger Rabbit. It's a shame we don't have it. I really do think it would be a great video game. This is not enjoyable. There's never been a single good Roger Rabbit video game. I've booted it up before this podcast to try and play it just to get my memories flowing, and it's unplayable.
Yeah.
It is.
It's
in 2023, no human should play this game. And I looked online because occasionally you'll find like people who find old NES games, and as a hobby, they just go, I'm going to make a ROM hack of this and improve it and fix all the problems. Nothing. No one has ever done anything to improve the Roger Rabbit game. And I don't know, could you? Are there any like tweaks you could make to make this? I mean, I think you'd have to like completely rewrite it.
Randomization.
Replace
Right.
it with a different game.
Remove all the randomness and have it be a genuine point and click where you go around and you talk to people and the people give you clues and hints and that's how you find the items. But that would be a completely different game.
I think we need to do, instead of this, we're going to do a ROM hack of L.A. Noire.
Yes.
We're going to put Eddie and Roger in L.A. Noire and then just keep everything exactly that way. I want to see that exact game. Now I really, really want
I honestly hope somebody's done that already.
I hope somebody, if they're not doing it, they absolutely should be, or else what is the point of everything? JR, thank you so much for joining us today. It was so fun chatting with you about this. I think we can safely say you are the person who has played Roger Rabbit, the video game, more than anyone else in the world. I think you can claim that credit. If somebody else wants to step forward for the crown, come at me, bro. But I think you've got it. So where else can people find your various podcast ventures?
You can find me on 302010, found where all your favorite podcasts can be found. It's the show where we talk about everything that happened this week in pop culture 30 years ago, 20 years ago, and 10 years ago. I also host a Patreon exclusive for listeners of 302010 called 80s in Depth, in which the really fantastic Steve joins us for frequent episodes.
We have a lot of fun. We talk about a lot of crazy movies. We did. What was the last one we did? I guess at the time of this recording,
the last one that you and I did together was the two Bond movies that both came out in 1983.
Yes, the 283, but the dueling Bonds when Roger Moore and Sean Connery were both Bonds.
Oh my God, I
year.
remember those so much.
Yeah, Octopussy and Never Say Never Again. Yeah, that's a fun episode. Yeah, definitely check that one out.
What a name.
Yeah.
Never Say Never Again. Like...
Huge hit movie. Yeah. Oh, never mind. Well, thank you again so much for being here. Everybody, definitely check out 302010. It's one of my favorite shows ever, and it's a delight to have you. And thank you, everybody, for listening. You can find us at Cinemarcade Podcast on Instagram and Gmail. Those are kind of really our only... Oh, and we're on YouTube now, so you can find us there as well if that's how you prefer to listen to your episodes.
What are we doing next week?
Oh, next week we are really mixing it up in a dramatic way. Something that a movie I have not seen, so this is one of the rare ones of those, and a game I have not played, so this could really go anywhere. I have a prediction of which way it's going to go because we're playing Balls of Fury. Yes, that's right.
Balls of Fury?
Balls of Fury, the 2007 Christopher Walken ping pong comedy, has a video game adaptation, and we're going to be talking about it.
You haven't seen this movie?
I have not seen
I
Balls
think
of
this
Fury.
might be the first movie that none of us have seen.
Have you not
I've seen it.
You've
What?
seen
What?
it? Justin's
It's the
ahead of
inverse
us.
of normal.
Oh my
Normally,
God.
I'm the one who has...
All right.
hasn't seen it.
We are already going into some uncharted territory with this one.
Now,
here,
granted,
so
I saw this movie when I was like 10.
Okay.
So it's been a while.
I imagine it holds up great. It has all mid-2000s
I don't think it
comedies,
will,
too.
but we'll see.
We will find out next week. So tune in next week and witness our Balls of Fury. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Good
Apologies
night.
for all of my squeaks.
Yeah, really, you could say the hiccups are the fourth host of the podcast. At this point. Yeah.
The fifth guest, second guest, whatever.
There you go.
Matt.
Bye, everybody.